So you're planning to get a home battery. Maybe you've already got solar and you want to add a battery to it, or you're planning for a new solar and battery installation. Either way, what's the best battery solution for your situation? There are so many factors to consider, it can feel like a bit of a maze, but if you stay with me, I'll guide you through it. Hi, I'm Gary and welcome back to my channel, Gary Does Solar. In this video, I want to walk you through the key factors to consider when choosing the ideal battery so that you can make a well-informed buying decision. And there are quite a few of them. Let's start with battery size. This is probably the first and one of the most important factors to consider. Get one too small and you'll miss out on all the benefits a larger battery would have provided. Get one too large and you may never see a payback for that extra expense. So how do you determine the best size for your battery? Well, in my last video we looked at 5 progressively compelling reasons to include a battery as part of your solar installation. And in that video we looked at battery size considerations, including the use of a free modelling utility I developed to help calculate the best battery size for your own situation, based on the size of your solar array, your daily usage, and also the energy tariff you prefer. I got a lot of great feedback on that video, and if you haven't seen it yet, I'll put a link in the description. Okay, let's look at another key factor now, charge and discharge rates. Let's say you use 15 kilowatt hours of electricity in a day. You might be thinking if you purchase a 15 kilowatt hour battery, then you're covered for the whole day. That could well be true, but it depends on when you use that electricity, and let me show you why. Here's a chart showing instantaneous power across a 24-hour period. Instantaneous meaning the amount of power your appliances are using at any moment in the day. For example, if you use a microwave, the power draw might be 1 kilowatt. And if you decide to boil a kettle at the same time, the power draw might jump to 2 kilowatts while both appliances are on. In our example profile here, you can see that much of the time only a few hundred watts is being consumed. But around breakfast time, this peaks at around 5.5 kilowatts. Then we have another larger peak in the evening, around 6 kilowatts. But here's the thing, if the battery you've chosen has a discharge rate of say 3 kilowatts, what we also refer to as the output, then if we plot that line on our chart, we can see that the battery is easily able to cover demand most of the day. But for the 2 peak periods, the battery can only cover the first 3 kilowatts. The remainder has to be covered by the grid, which of course will cost you money. Choosing a battery with a high enough discharge rate or output to cover how you actually use electricity in the day is an important factor. And it's not just the discharge rate either, the charge rate of the battery is also important. In the winter, when there is little sun, you might choose an energy tariff which has an off-peak import period in the morning, allowing you to charge your battery with a cheap rate. But if your battery is 15 kilowatt hours in size, you might find that a charge rate of 3 kilowatts is not enough to charge the battery in the 3 or 4 hours you have available. The modelling utility I spoke about earlier can be used to try out various charge and discharge rate scenarios with different battery sizes so you can get a good idea on how well your battery will perform in a real environment. There's a link to it in the description and it's free to use. Okay, next up, AC or DC coupled. Now it won't take you long in your research into batteries before you come across these terms. Which is better, AC or DC coupled? And what do these terms even mean? To find out, we need to understand how batteries are wired into a home installation, and there are essentially 2 options. Let's start with DC coupled. Here is a typical solar installation. We have a solar array feeding into a string inverter, which converts the DC power from the panels into AC, ready for consumption by various household appliances. The grid is also connected to the AC so that it can power those appliances when there is no solar generation. If our string inverter has a maximum limit of 5 kilowatts and the array is generating the same, the inverter will put all of that power onto the AC supply. And if the appliance draw is only 3 kilowatts and there is no battery in place, the remaining 2 kilowatts will be exported. Let's now add a battery then. This is a DC coupled battery and it gets its name because it is connected to the inverter on the DC side. And it requires a special kind of string inverter called a hybrid inverter. When the battery is connected, the inverter senses that 2 kilowatts is currently being exported, and so instead it uses that power to charge the battery. Note that because both the solar array and battery are DC, there is no conversion required. That power goes straight into the battery. Now, a unique feature of a DC coupled battery is in the case when there is more solar being generated than the inverter limit, and it can use that excess DC power to charge the battery. So here we have 8 kilowatts of solar generation coming in, 5 kilowatts of that is converted to AC, the limit of the inverter, and the remaining 3 kilowatts is sent to the battery. It sounds like a great benefit, but let's see that feature in action on my own installation on a very sunny day. This is a chart from my GivEnergy battery. If we remove everything apart from the battery and solar related data, you can see that it's a really great looking solar bell curve, which has a bite out of it starting from noon onwards. Why is that? If we plot onto this chart the maximum AC output of my inverter, you can see that normally the generation would be permanently clipped at 5 kilowatts throughout the day, and from noon it is. Prior to that though, the battery is charging using solar, so the inverter uses the excess solar above 5 kilowatts to assist that charging. Then at noon, when the battery is full, the inverter starts clipping. The thing is, if we look at the energy we gained from this feature compared to the total generation for the day, it's barely a couple of %. So I have to ask myself, is this feature really worth it? Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, later, when there is no solar generation, if the household appliances are drawing power, the inverter discharges the battery to meet that requirement. It's worth noting that because there is a DC to AC conversion during this discharge, there is a slight loss of power, perhaps 3% or so. Okay, what if the household appliances require 6 kilowatts of power? Let's say we have 4 kilowatts of solar generation. The battery is able to discharge at 2 kilowatts to meet the total requirement, but the inverter limit of 5 kilowatts prevents that from happening. This means the battery can only discharge at 1 kilowatt to make up a total of 5 kilowatts being converted to AC. That's not enough, so the grid steps in to supply the remaining 1 kilowatt. It's generally possible to have more than one DC coupled battery converted to the same inverter, but don't expect the discharge rate to increase. This is dependent on the inverter. My own installation has 2 DC coupled batteries connected, but the charge and discharge rates remain the same as if only one battery was connected. And even if the inverter could double the discharge rate, there is still the inverter limit itself. By the way, if you're getting a lot out of this video, I'd be very grateful if you could take a moment just now and hit the like button so that others can see it. And I'd love you to subscribe at the same time so you don't miss out on my future videos. If you'd like to support my channel and you live in the UK, I highly recommend Octopus as your energy supplier, and I've made videos on some of their excellent energy tariffs. Please feel free to use my referral code here if you'd like to switch to Octopus Energy. And if you have any problems doing that, just email me. And thanks to all of you who have used my referral code already. Your support means a great deal to me. Okay, let's look now at the other battery option then, AC coupled. Instead of connecting a battery to the DC side of the inverter, we can connect it to the AC supply instead, like the Tesla Powerwall 2, one of the most well-known AC coupled batteries. But how is this possible given that batteries are DC? If we look inside an AC coupled battery, we see it comprises 2 elements, the battery itself, but also a charge controller, which manages when the battery charges and discharges, and also carries out the AC to DC conversions. It's worth noting that some AC coupled batteries come as 2 separate units, a battery and a battery inverter. And they're slightly less efficient too. As we saw earlier, a DC coupled battery only has a single power conversion, but an AC coupled battery has 3. From DC to AC in the string inverter, then AC back to DC before charging the battery, and finally DC back to AC again when discharging. If we assume, say, roughly 3% loss of power per conversion, that's a total round-trip loss of nearly 10%. It feels like DC coupled batteries have a real edge here with only a 3% power loss. But when I look at the effect of these losses in many modelling scenarios I've carried out with both DC and AC coupled batteries, it doesn't actually make a lot of difference to the overall results. So for me, it's not really a factor in any decision making. Okay, let's see how an AC coupled battery compares to a DC coupled battery in daily operation then. If our array is generating 5 kilowatts, the inverter will convert all of that to AC. And if the household appliances only require 3 kilowatts of power, the charge controller or external battery inverter will sense there is 2 kilowatts going spare, and so will use that to charge the battery. But let's say the appliance draw is now 6 kilowatts. The string inverter cannot supply more than 5 kilowatts because of the AC limitation, but the battery can supply the remaining 1 kilowatt by discharging straight onto the AC circuit. You can add further AC coupled batteries and the charge and discharge rates generally go up each time. So in our example here, if there is no draw from the appliances, the 5 kilowatts from the string inverter and 5 kilowatts from each of the 2 batteries will be exported. Now your DNO, the district network operator, might not be happy with all that export, and so in most countries you'll need to apply for additional certification. And this may result in your DNO placing a restriction on the amount of power that you can export. One final point is that AC coupled batteries are far more interoperable with EV chargers and solar diverters. The problem with using a DC coupled battery is that these products can't see what the battery is doing because it's behind the inverter. And this can result in the battery discharging itself into your EV or solar diverter, an unwanted outcome. There are ways around this though. As a summary then, here are the pros and cons for both DC coupled and AC coupled batteries. I purchased a DC coupled battery myself, but if I had my time again, I'd go for an AC coupled battery. Not least because it would largely solve the problem when drawing from the grid when I exceed my 5 kilowatt inverter limit. Okay, let's consider another factor then, battery chemistry. This one's pretty straightforward. It's about what the battery is made of. At the moment, batteries used for home solar and things like electric vehicles are based on two types of lithium ion. NMC, which stands for nickel manganese cobalt oxide, and LFP, which stands for lithium ferrophosphate. NMC is a relatively new technology compared to LFP, which has been around since the 1990s. Both generate electricity through chemical reactions from lithium, but the difference lies in the choice of cathode material in the battery cell. Lithium in its element form is unstable, and therefore requires a cathode combination to keep it stabilized as a source of lithium ions in a battery. Cathode material in an NMC battery is a combination of nickel, manganese and cobalt, while in an LFP battery it is iron and phosphate. Here is a high-level comparison of the two chemistries. Energy density. NMC batteries typically have a higher energy density than LFP batteries, the amount of energy stored per unit of volume or weight, and this makes them much more suitable for applications where space and weight are at a premium, like electric vehicles. LFP batteries are still relatively compact and lightweight, however, and their energy density has been steadily improving over the years. Charging speed. NMC batteries can charge at a faster rate than LFP, but LFP is catching up today through use of things like dual plugs and cables. Longevity. LFP batteries have a longer life cycle than NMC. That's the number of charge and discharge cycles they can go through before performance starts to degrade. However, both battery types, if used correctly, can last 10 years or more. Cost. For an equivalent capacity, NMC used to be cheaper than LFP, but with nickel and cobalt becoming increasingly difficult to mine against iron and phosphate, which are abundant across the earth, LFP represents a cheaper solution than NMC. And finally, safety. The stable chemical properties and structural framework of LFP batteries make them much more tolerant of higher voltage conditions and wider temperature variations, and therefore less prone to catching fire or exploding even under extreme conditions. NMC batteries, on the other hand, are prone to thermal runaway if they are damaged or subjected to high temperatures, causing them to catch fire or explode. LFP batteries are therefore safer than NMC batteries. Looking at all these factors, because safety is paramount when choosing a battery for the home, this factor has far greater weighting than all the other factors in my view, making LFP a far better option. This next factor is not so much of an issue with the latest batteries, but it's worth knowing about so you don't get caught out when choosing your battery, especially if you're buying an older model. It's called depth of discharge. A term you'll hear a lot when we're talking about how much energy is stored in a battery is state of charge, or SOC for short. This is the amount of charge a battery has stored in relation to its total capacity, expressed as a percentage. Right now, this battery has a 0% state of charge, but after charging, it has a 100% state of charge. There is another related term to this called depth of discharge, or DOD for short. It's the exact opposite of state of charge, meaning the amount of charge in the battery down from its maximum capacity, expressed as a percentage. Right now, this battery has a 0% depth of discharge, but if we use a lot of that energy over time, the battery now only has a 20% state of charge, but importantly an 80% depth of discharge. Now this particular percentage, 80%, is important for lithium-ion batteries, because if you routinely go below an 80% depth of discharge, you dramatically shorten the lifespan of the battery. To prevent this then, the battery manufacturers express a maximum depth of discharge for their products. For example, this battery might have a 5 kWh capacity, but it's a 5 kWh capacity with an 80% depth of discharge. It actually only has 4 kilowatt hours of usable capacity. Watch out then when you're buying a battery. The good news is that all the latest home batteries on the market today generally are marketed with 100% depth of discharge. And that's not because they've got around the limitations of lithium-ion chemistry, they simply include 25% extra capacity. So a 10 kilowatt hour battery marketed with 100% depth of discharge is in reality a 12.5 kilowatt battery with an 80% depth of discharge. Before we go on to the next key factor for you to consider, I'd like to quickly tell you about my Patreon, where you can get access to the Pro version of the modelling utility we looked at earlier. It has a great look and feel and a whole load of exclusive features which are being added to all the time. And soon you'll be able to model up to 3 solar arrays, all with different orientations at the same time, and see your generation over the whole year. To find out more, just click here. Thank you. Okay, it's time now to consider lifetime and warranty. How long your home battery will last is largely dependent on how hard you work it, and a term you'll hear a lot in relation to this is battery cycles. A cycle is generally determined to have taken place when you have charged and then discharged your battery by its full depth of discharge. And that doesn't have to happen in a single charge. If you charge and discharge only half your battery on one day and then repeat that the next day, this will count as a single battery cycle. The performance of your battery can be expected to deteriorate over time in line with the number of cycles it undergoes. The warranty of that battery is typically expressed as a maximum number of cycles, meaning that if your battery exceeds that limit, the warranty is void, for example 6,000 cycles, a period of time regardless of the number of cycles used, for example 10 years, or a combination of the two, for example 6,000 cycles or 10 years, whichever comes first. From what I'm seeing in the market, warranties in terms of time with unlimited cycles seem to be the norm today. Let's say your battery has a warranty of 10 years with unlimited cycles. You could take the approach to look after your battery, only charging and discharging where necessary, so that your battery will last longer than the warranty period, maybe up to 15 years, and this will help you with your return on investment. Or you could take the approach to hammer the battery, knowing that if it fails at any time during the warranty period, you'll get a free replacement. And there are certainly energy tariffs available through use of features like forced charging and discharging would allow you to cycle your battery once or even twice a day. Of course, after the 10 years, your battery will almost certainly be dead, but is that really a problem? Technology is always improving, and in 10 years' time, an equivalent battery might cost far less. And actually, you might prefer a much bigger battery at that time for the same original cost. My view on this is that batteries are made to be worked, so let's give them a good workout and see how the landscape looks in 10 years' time. Okay, let's look at another factor then when choosing a battery, EPS. EPS stands for Emergency Power Supply, and it's the ability to automatically or manually switch over to powering all or part of your home from battery storage in the event of power outage. For most systems, by default there is no EPS, meaning that should the grid fail, your solar and battery system is automatically disconnected from the main supply. And that's even though you might have sufficient charge in your battery to power your home appliances. There are, however, various levels of EPS available for your battery, depending on the technology offered by the manufacturers. Level 1 EPS provides a couple of main sockets which remain live in the event of a power outage, and you can use these to power various appliances such as your internet router, TV or fridge. Level 2 EPS will typically keep lighting and perhaps refrigeration running in the event of a power cut via an automatic switchover, typically after a short delay. Level 3 EPS is able to power your whole house from your battery via a manual switchover. This allows you to ensure any heavy appliances are switched off before the changeover in order to conserve battery power for as long as possible. Level 4 EPS is the same, but the switchover is automatic, either instantaneously or after a short delay. And finally, Level 5 EPS provides off-grid capability, meaning that you can run the whole house off your battery, continuously replenish from solar generation, for days, weeks or possibly months on end. Depending on where you live in the world, not least with the effects of climate change, having an EPS option for your battery could be very important. And so it's worth checking carefully to see what level of EPS various products can offer. One final key factor for the moment then is management capabilities. These range from basic functions you should expect through to much more complex capability. First, there are basic functions that every battery should provide. Your battery should automatically charge using excess solar generation, then discharge to avoid home appliances drawing from the grid. You should also be able to see what the battery is doing, as well as historical performance using a web portal and ideally an app for your mobile device. Then your battery should hopefully provide manual control functions that will allow you to capitalize on the various smart energy tariffs available. For example, being able to force charge during cheaper off-peak import periods and force discharge during peak export periods. Going further, the latest batteries allow for automatic control. They can link to weather services to determine whether forced charging is needed if the next day is going to be very sunny. And some batteries also provide access via an API, or Application Programming Interface. An API allows third-party apps and services to manage your battery via the internet or local connectivity, for example Home Assistant. And this kind of connectivity can be used to interconnect your battery with all your other solar installation components, like EV chargers and solar diverters, so that they can all see each other. Finally, some batteries are already integrated with higher order services that will soon be commonplace across the world. For example, demand flexibility schemes like this one from SolarEdge, and virtual power plants like this one from Tesla. I had planned to talk about how to calculate the return on investment for your battery in this video, but it's more complicated than I thought, and so I'm going to cover that in a future video. Instead then, let's have a look at some of the latest batteries on the market, and you can see how they compare against each other. I've included links to all these batteries in the video description. We should start with the Tesla Powerwall 2, as this has set the standard for home batteries, and most manufacturers are now marketing cloned versions of this model. We'll be comparing all the batteries I'm showing using these metrics. Let's get started. The Powerwall 2 is AC coupled, meaning it can be added to any solar installation, but it's NMC, which is just not as safe as LFP in the home. It's quite a large battery with a capacity of 13.5 kilowatt hours, and like all the batteries you're about to see, it has 100% depth of discharge. You can stack 10 of these batteries together to give you a total capacity of a whopping 135 kilowatt hours. It has a discharge rate, a continuous output of 5 kilowatts, and if you stack these batteries, that rate adds up each time. It's also able to provide whole house EPS, and it comes with a 10-year unlimited cycle warranty. I've added a rough cost so you can see how the prices compare across the batteries. Now, the Powerwall 2 was launched way back in 2016, and so you might expect a newer model to be coming out at some point. Details on this are sparse, but the rumours indicate that the Powerwall 3 will be LFP instead of NMC. It'll have the same capacity, but a higher continuous output rate of up to 11.5 kilowatts. Next up is the FranklinWH aPower, a clone of the Tesla Powerwall 2, but it's already LFP and has a slightly higher capacity and a slightly longer warranty. Then we have a battery from LG, another Tesla clone, but it can be AC or DC coupled, and it has a slightly higher capacity and an improved continuous output of 7.5 kilowatts. The Enphase 10T capacity is LFP, but it has a lower capacity and lower continuous output. Their highest warranty is longer at 15 years, but it has a 6,000 cycle limit. The SunVault battery from SunPower is LFP and comes in various capacities starting at 13 kilowatt hours. It also has a pretty high continuous output compared to the other batteries. The StorEdge from SolarEdge is very similar to the Powerwall 2, except that it's DC coupled with a lower capacity. It's also more expensive than all the others per kilowatt hour. Finally, if you live outside the UK, you may not have heard of GivEnergy, who manufactures string inverters and other solar-related products, including batteries. They recently launched the GivEnergy All-in-One battery, which is aimed squarely at the Tesla Powerwall 2 market. What makes it special is that it's already LFP, and it's less than 2/3 the price of a Powerwall. If you want to find out more about this battery, my friend Tim, who with his wife Kat, run a YouTube channel called Tim and Kat's Green Walk. Tim was invited to GivEnergy's headquarters the other week to talk about their new all-in-one battery for a new video. I'll put a link in the description as soon as the video is available, and it's worth sticking around to watch Tim and Kat's other videos on their channel, especially those on removing the gas supply from their home, something I'd like to do at some point. Okay, thanks for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope it's been useful to you. I look forward to seeing you next time, and thanks for all your support.